Hi everyone, it's Shannon here for Waffle Flower Crafts. In today's video, we are going to create a really fun card using the new Holiday Hugs combo set from Waffle Flower Crafts. This awesome set was designed by JJ Bolton and it's so clever and so unique. It creates a card that practically hugs you back, and we are going to add lots of texture and details to our fun card today. So these are the new Waffle Flower products I'll be using today. On the left is the Lattice panel die. We'll be using that for dry embossing. And here we have the awesome Holiday Hugs combo set with the dies in the back and the stamp sets in the front. So before we dive right in, I wanted to show you the finished card. I wanted you to kind of see how the die works, how it creates these arms that open up to create an awesome paper hug. And we are going to add lots of texture, as you can see, so let's get started. So to start, I have 4 A2 panels of 110-pound white cardstock. I'm going to set one of those panels aside. That's going to be the back of my card, and the 3 remaining panels will be my 2 arms and the center of my card. The first thing I'm going to do is cut my arm, so I'm going to grab that arm die from the Holiday Hugs die set, and I'm going to center it here. Well, kind of leave the back half off a little bit. You can see the die is a little bit bigger than an A2 panel. That is so you can create a really sturdy flap to attach to your card base, but I found that just with the 1/4-inch flap here I had really good connection. So if you want a better one, you can definitely use a larger than an A2 panel to die cut your arm. I'm going to now cut the right arm. Now, because I am using this paper that is recycled sort of, and I have this grid and I don't want that to be visible, I'm going to have to turn that grid right side up. This is something to be mindful of if you have pattern paper and you want to make sure that pattern paper is visible as well. You're going to have to flip your paper over to die cut the right side of the arm. Basically, for your right arm, the back side of your cardstock will now be the front of your right arm. So just keep that in mind, especially if you're using pattern paper that isn't double-sided. So now I'm going to cut these additional panels. So I grabbed some 2 additional panels here to create the inside portion of my arm. This is to cover up that grid that you see there, but this might be something you want to do too if you're using pattern paper that is only one-sided and you want that pattern to be on the inside of your card as well. I'm also doing this for another reason, because I want that dry embossing to be all going the right way, all outverted essentially, and that requires I have to dry emboss those inside arm pieces as well. So now moving on to my dry embossing. So no matter what die cutting machine you have, to dry emboss you need a rubber mat. I have a Cuttlebug, and for my sandwich I have my A plate, then a piece of cardstock, then a B plate, then my rubber mat, and then I will grab my cardstock, place it down, and then top it off with the die. And so what I'm strategically arranging this die here, because there is kind of a flat portion, like it's a frame of the die, and I thought that frame worked really well for creating like a little sleeve. So I'm positioning that frame portion right where the sleeve would be, and you can see it creates this nice like line that represents kind of the sleeve. So I think that worked out pretty well. I'm going to repeat that now for this second arm. And again, lining up that frame part where the sleeve would be and then running that through my die cutting machine. So I'm simply going to repeat this process for all 4 pieces of my arms, and I'm also going to dry emboss my center panel. First thing I'm going to do is find the very center of my center panel. This is going to be the inside of my card, and now I'm going to line up the Lattice panel die as best I can, center it right there on the panel, right on my center line. And I'm going to dry emboss half of it. Then I'm going to rotate the panel around, or rotate the die around, and then dry emboss the other half. The only trick here is when you're running your sandwich through your die cutting machine, just make sure to stop before you get to the other half. That way you don't kind of smush the dry embossing that you just did prior. Now I'll just erase that pencil line, and that kind of creates a line down the sweater, which is where we're going to add buttons later. So now I'm going to reinforce the score line that the arm die makes in the cardstock. I'm just going to kind of position that score line in my scoreboard and just reinforce it, make it again. That just helps to when you crease it over, you fold it over, it makes it a little bit easier. I did that on the other arm as well. And now I'm finally going to glue these two arm pieces together. And that's going to complete that left arm. And I'm just using liquid glue here. And as you can see, this is I'm closing up, I'm covering up that grid, but I'm also keeping that dry embossing consistent, so it's outverted on both the inside and the outside of the card, so it just has a nice consistent look. So now I'm going to take some more of the dies from the Holiday Hugs die set and die cut these mittens from some felt, and I thought felt was just a fun way to add some texture to your card. I maybe went a little bit overboard here, and I did it twice, so that way the felt mittens are both on the inside and the outside. These mittens also have this little like additional kind of border here that I'm going to die cut out of felt as well. So this does get kind of thick, and you can definitely just forego the felt if you choose and use just colored cardstock or pattern paper instead, but I went all out on texture on these cards. So now I'm moving on to stamping my sentiment. I have a strip of vellum here in my MISTI, and I'm going to pull off a sentiment from the Holiday Hugs stamp set, center it on that strip of vellum. The vellum is about 1.25 inches thick or wide, and it is about it's larger than 5.5 inches, so it is about 6 inches long. So I just stamped my sentiment in Versamark ink, and now I'm going to pour on some silver embossing powder, and then I will heat set this. And this will go on the inside of my card. I had to do the sentiment on vellum because, again, that inside of my card is all textured with that dry embossing, so it would be very difficult to stamp on, and if I did stamp on beforehand, it would probably be difficult to read. So now I'm going to move on to starting to make some embellishments. I have the Oversized Mary stamp set, and I'm going to stamp some snowflakes from that set onto a scrap of vellum. Again, apply some anti-static powder, then ink up my snowflakes with Versamark ink, and I will also silver emboss these snowflakes as well. Just tap off the excess and then heat set this just like I did before for the sentiment. I will stamp the smaller snowflake a second time, so I have two small snowflakes, and that larger snowflake will actually become a brooch, and the smaller ones will be kind of just accents on the mittens. So I'm just heat setting the second little snowflake here, and then I will move on to cutting these out. So there's no matching dies for these, so I'm just going to fussy cut these out. Really simple, keeping it simple here. The nice thing about vellum is that you don't have to fussy cut like absolutely perfectly, because the vellum is so soft you won't really notice little imperfections. It's not like a hard obvious edge like a white edge or even colored cardstock. So I wanted to create a neckline, so I grabbed two circles from the Nesting Circles die cut them out of some white cardstock to kind of create this border, and I am going to trace it here onto my center panel where I want it to go, and then just cut out that inside portion of the neckline and where your neck would be, and then erase my pencil lines, and then I will take that circle frame that I created and just adhere it right on to that A2 panel. And once I've adhered it, I will trim off the excess, and then I will move on to finally assembling this card. So I have that blank panel that I reserved in the very, very beginning here. The grid side is up right now. The nice clean blank side is face down. I'm going to add a 1/4 inch score tape to the back side of the flap of both of my arms. And then once I've got that stuck down, I'll remove the backing and then stick it right down onto this A2 panel, this blank A2 panel. And again, this is the A2 panel that we set aside in the very, very beginning. So just going to stick that down, line up the fold right along with the side of the A2 panel. They line up perfectly. And once we stick that down, we basically have our arms in place. Now I'm ready for this center panel, and I want this, my sentiment to be kind of, at least the vellum sentiment edges to be folded over, because vellum is a bit tricky to stick down because glue is visible. So I just folded the edges over and then used score tape to hold those little flaps down. And then once I get that stuck, I can now finally glue my center panel onto my card. Again, I'm going to use some liquid glue here, just place it all over, and then stick that right down. Now it's finally coming together and really looking like a card now. So now we're going to move on to the mittens, and these mittens are felt, and I just found that felt stuck better when I used hot glue, even though hot glue is not my most favorite thing to work with. But I just got a little bit of hot glue on the cardstock and then popped the mitten down. And I'm doing a little bit of hot glue also for the little border that the mittens have as well. As you can see, I cut out two of the right mitten, two of the left mitten, and two of the borders, so I had a front and back on both of the mittens on both arms. So now I'm going to use hot glue again for my little embellishments here, my little snowflakes that go on the mittens. Again, these were ones that we heat embossed on vellum and then fussy cut out. And then I'm going to move on to my buttons. So I'm using Waffle Flower's Clean and Clear enamel dots. I pulled off the largest white enamel dots from that set, and I'm just popping them here on that center section of the sweater just to create the look of buttons. I thought this was just kind of a fun little detail and really does, again, kind of push that look of a sweater, really reinforces that look of a sweater. So once I have all these buttons in place, I'm now moving on to my brooch. Now for my brooch, I just use a little piece of score tape and stuck it down, and now I'm going to embellish with these silver enamel dots, and I'm using those on the brooch as well, some really tiny ones on the very edge. I did a little bit bigger one for the center, so just going to pop those guys in place. Again, more texture, more details. I think I went all out on this, and then I did a little bit more here on the mittens as well. And that actually completes that card. So once again, let's take a look at the finished card, all folded up. I love the way it looks all folded, and I love how the arms kind of hide where our sentiment is. I think that makes for a fun reveal, and it's just kind of cool when you open it. It really does look like open arms, like a nice paper hug. I just think this is such a sweet and brilliant card design, and it's really fun, and there's just so many different versions you can do with it. So here is a second card that I created. I didn't dry emboss on this card, obviously. I stamped my paper, basically created my own pattern paper. I used a snowflake from the Oversized Mary stamp set and some border stamps from the Pattern Play stamp set to kind of create this really fun pattern. And I stamped it in some pink ink, so basically tone on tone on some pink cardstock. The center, the hugs and the heart, I die cut out of white felt from using the Holiday Hugs die set, so those are included in the die. So just to create kind of like a fun center for a shirt. So there's lots of different fun little versions you can do of this Holiday Hugs card idea. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you want any more information on the products I use, please visit Waffle Flower, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.